evening, everybody. It will be our pleasure for the next 2 hours or so to cover the following topics regarding the law on negotiable instruments. On our presentation, we will be able to discuss the negotiable instrument, requisites of negotiability, negotiation and its kinds of endorsers, and discharge of instruments. By the way, I am Milson Espinas, and today we'll be discussing the so-called Negotiable Instruments Law of the Philippines, or what is known as Act Number 2031. Our Act Number 2031, or the Negotiable Instruments Law of the Philippines, was enacted on February 3 of 1911. So if it was enacted on the said date, when is the date of its effectivity? The law provides that it shall take effect 90 days following the completion of its publication in the official gazette. So, to be able to know the date of its effectivity, you have to know also when was the last day of its publication. Well, the publication was completed on March 4, 1911. Thus, it becomes effective on June 2, 1911. So with that, we can now consider the functions of negotiable instruments law. There are two notable functions of negotiable instruments. The first one is that it increases the medium of currency in circulation, and the other is it is considered as a substitute for money. Kasi hindi na lang pera ang medium of exchange, kundi pati na rin ang cheque, promissory note, bills of exchange. It is also an evidence of the transaction. Pag nag-issue ka ng negotiable instrument, sa likod nun may transaction. So do not forget those little things, but even if it is a substitute for money, it is not legal in tender. So, what is legal tender? Legal tender refers to a kind of currency which a debtor can compel a creditor to receive as payment of an obligation in money. And in the Philippines, our legal tender is the Philippine peso. So, kung may utang ka, yun ang gagamitin mo na pambayad. Kung ayaw tanggapin ng creditor mo, as long as it is complete, as long as it is a full payment, then you can go to court in order to compel your creditor to receive that payment. Going on further, what is a negotiable instrument? Well, it has been defined that a negotiable instrument refers to a written contract for the payment of money by which, by its form and on its face, is intended as a substitute for money, and just like money, it is allowed to pass from one hand to another so as to give the holder in due course the right to hold the instrument and later on to demand payment of the face value of that instrument. So, it is clear that a negotiable instrument is written. It is in writing. Thus, there is no possibility that you will be issuing an oral or a verbal negotiable instrument. Because when we say instrument, it connotes that it must be written and should be for the payment of money and not for the rendition of any other obligation besides the payment of money. Going on further, what are the characteristics of a negotiable instrument? The first one is negotiability. This is the attribute of an instrument that allows it to be passed from one hand to another similar to money, so as to give the holder in due course the right to hold the instrument free from any defect of title of prior parties and free defenses available to prior parties among themselves, and enforce payment of the instrument for the full amount thereof against all parties liable thereon. Simply stated, when the instrument is negotiable, it is capable of being transferred from one person to another. It passes from one hand to another as a substitute for money. However, remember only a negotiable instrument will possess that type of characteristic. And how would I know whether or not my instrument is negotiable? The instrument is said to be negotiable if it has complied with the essential requisites of a negotiable instrument as provided in Section 1 of the Negotiable Instruments Law. So, later on, i-discuss natin kung ano-ano yung mga requisites ng negotiable instrument. The second characteristic is accumulation of secondary contracts. This characteristic is actually interrelated with the first one. Why is that? Because I have mentioned to you a while ago that when your instrument is negotiable, then it can be passed from one hand to another as if it is substitute for money. In the process of changing of hands, in the process of negotiating your instrument, then there will now be the accumulation of secondary contracts. So, gaya nga ng sabi ko kanina, the instrument is said to be negotiable if it has complied with the essential requisites of a negotiable instrument as provided in Section 1 of the Negotiable Instruments Law, as long as it will comply with those 5 requirements: that it must be in writing and signed by the maker or drawer, that it must contain an unconditional promise to pay a sum certain in money, that it must be payable on demand or at a fixed determinable future time, that it must be payable to order or to bearer, or as that if it is a bill of exchange, then the drawee must be named or otherwise indicated therein with reasonable certainty. As long as those 5 requirements are present, then you are certain that you have a negotiable instrument. So let's illustrate using the following. Promissory note, because it says here a maker. So maker will transfer that to the payee P, and P later on will transfer that to A, our endorsee. Okay, so now M, our maker, would issue that later on to P. P, after holding that instrument, he will deliver that to A. That's what we call now as endorsement. That is negotiation. A to B, B to C, C to D, and D to E. Okay, so where is our primary contract? Remember, it involves only the accumulation of secondary contracts. So where is our primary contract? Our primary contract is between our maker and our payee. So if ever M will issue that instrument to P, so the first delivery of the instrument is known as issuance. So maker to payee, that is not yet the secondary contract. That is the first contract. That is our primary contract. So if P, now the payee, will later on transfer that to A, that is the first negotiation. That is the first secondary contract. When A would later on negotiate that again to B, that is our secondary contract. B to C, that is the third secondary contract. C to D, that is the fourth secondary contract. And D to E, that is the fifth secondary contract. So, the more negotiations that you will undertake, the more transfers that you will make, the more secondary contracts that will be created, okay? We also have 3 common forms of negotiable instrument. We have the negotiable promissory note and the negotiable bill of exchange. The law also gives us a unique kind of bill of exchange, and it's called a check. All other instruments are non-negotiable instruments. So according to Section 184 of the Negotiable Instruments Act of 2031, a negotiable promissory note is an unconditional promise to pay a sum certain in money. This promise must be in writing and signed by the maker of this promise, may be made payable to the bearer of promissory note or to his order. It must be payable upon demand or at a fixed determinable future time. The definition teaches us many things, mga sis. Una, ang promissory note ay unconditional promise. Ibig sabihin, kapag binalik sa akin ang promissory note, ay babayaran ko siya, walang tanong, walang conditions. Di ko pwedeng sabihin na, ay next week na lang bro, short kasi ako. Di ko rin pwedeng sabihin na, next week na lang sis sa susunod na sweldo, promise. Second, this promissory note must be in writing. Pwedeng sulat kamay, pwedeng typewritten. Writing also means it can be printed from a computer or some other means. Dapat ba A4 lang ang pagpiprintan? Pwede bang tarpaulin? Sure mga sis, pwede yan. Basta in writing and more importantly, signed by the maker. Pwede po bang thumb mark or kiss mark? Pwede naman yan so long as sa lahat ng pirma mo mula sa driver's license, passport hanggang sa attendance sa klase, kiss mark ang gamit mo. GG yan mga sis, valid yan. Further, the Negotiable Instruments Law tells us that the promissory note may be payable to the bearer or to his order. Meaning, kung ako ang maker ng promissory note at minsan akong nangako na babayaran ko ang 10,000 pesos sa'yo, sis Rothschild, or to your order, meaning kahit sinong inominate mo dyan, babayaran at babayaran ko yan. Again, unconditional promise to pay. The law also requires that payment must be paid in a sum certain in money. Huwag mong i-confuse yan sa certain sum of money, magkaiba yan. When the law says a sum certain in money, it means an amount which is defined, particular, but not necessarily exact. Kunwari, kung may interest, magko-compute tayo, so we don't know the exact amount yet. And ang importante lang, defined lang yung amount. When the note says, I promise to pay a certain sum of money, walang definite amount yan. Hindi yan pasok sa definition ng promissory note. At katulad ng nabanggit ko kanina, there are only 2 kinds of instruments, the negotiable and non-negotiable. Pagpasok sa definition, it is negotiable. All other instruments are non-negotiable. Finally, the last element, the promissory note must be payable upon demand or at a fixed determinable future time. Upon demand, simple lang yan. You come to me, you give me back the promise I made, that piece of paper, or kung sinulat natin sa tarpaulin, and I will fulfill that promise to pay 10,000 pesos. Fixed determinable future time could mean one of two things. It can mean an exact date, let's say February 14, 2021. Hanapin mo ako sa Valentine's Day at babayaran kita based sa promissory note. Fixed determinable future time din ang 30 days after the election. The election by law always falls on the second Monday of May. Fixed yan, determinable yan. Pero at the time na nagsusulat tayo, yan ang best estimate ko na kaya kitang bayaran. Another example of a certain event is the day a person died. The promissory note can be made payable 40 days from the day a person dies. Going on further, let's look at the illustration of a promissory note. Okay, so in this illustration, we have said a while ago that promissory note contains an unconditional promise to pay. So where is the promise here? This is the promise to pay. Is it conditional? Obviously, it is unconditional because the promise made by Kim Tae-yong, our maker, does not depend upon any event which may or may not happen. It simply stated that he promised to pay Jung Kook or ordered the amount of 1 million. So let's try to digest it first. Tae-yong is known as the maker, the person who prepared the promissory note. Jungkook is known as the payee, the person in whose favor this instrument was made. Order refers to any person to whom Jungkook will transfer later the instrument, so it could be X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, etc. 1 million is the sum certain in money, and the word promise here is the unconditional promise or the unconditional undertaking to deliver the payment to Jungkook or to the transferee of Jungkook. So that is our illustration on what we call a promissory note. How about a bill of exchange? If a promissory note contains an unconditional promise to pay, a bill of exchange contains an unconditional order made by our drawer addressed to a person known as a drawee, requiring the drawee to pay on demand or at a fixed or at a determinable future time a sum certain in money to order or to bearer. So, how will we now distinguish a promissory note from a bill of exchange? In a promissory note, the maker himself will be the one to pay because he is the one giving the unconditional promise to pay. Whereas, in a bill of exchange, the person who prepared the bill of exchange, known as the drawer, is not the one who will deliver the payment to the payee or to the bearer of the instruments. Our drawer in a bill of exchange is just the one giving the command to pay, giving the unconditional order to pay. So, who is being ordered to pay here? The one being ordered to pay is known as a drawee. And later, you would learn that if the drawee will now accede to the command or order of the drawer to pay, he will have a conversion and he will now be known as the acceptor of the instrument. So, if you would be asked who would pay the bill of exchange, it is the person known as the acceptor. And who is the acceptor? He is the drawee, the person being commanded, being directed, being mandated, being ordered by the drawer to pay. And why did he become the acceptor? Because he acceded, he consented to the order of our drawer to deliver the payment. If he did not give his consent, if he did not accept the order, he remains as a drawee, and as a drawee, he has no liability in the instrument. Remember that. If our drawee did not accede to the unconditional order of the drawer to pay, the drawee has no liability. His liability will attach only if ever he gives his conformity to the order of our drawer. So in this example, let's try to consider who are the parties here. Who is Park Jimin? Jimin is the one who prepared our bill of exchange. So Jimin is known as our drawer. How about Kim Sok-jin? Jin is the person being ordered by Jimin to pay the instrument. So Jin is known as the drawee. The person being ordered, being directed, being mandated by Jimin to pay the instrument. How about Jungkook? Jungkook here is the pay of our bill of exchange, the person in whose favor this bill of exchange, and then 1 million is the sum certain in money. We have mentioned a while ago that in a bill of exchange, there is an unconditional order to pay. Where is the command to pay? Where is the order to pay? Where is the mandate to pay? Well, this word, pay, magbayad ka. Is it dependent upon a condition? Meron bang choice si Jin kung hindi magbayad lamang? Pag sinabi ni Jimin na, Jin, bayaran mo si Jungkook ng 1 milyon, that is a mandate to pay. That is an unconditional order to pay. So take note that in a bill of exchange, The person who prepared it, which is Jimin, is not the one who will deliver the payment to Jungkook. Rather, the payment will be made by Jin in favor of Jungkook. Why is that? Because Jimin is giving a command to Jin, sabi niya, "O Jin, bayaran mo si Jungkook ng 1 million. That is unconditional order to pay." Pero, meron akong sinabi kanina, ano yon? The Chin initially is known as a drawee, the person being commanded to pay. Before the liability of Chin will attach, before he will be required to pay Jungkook na amount of 1 million, ano ang requirement? Dapat merong acceptance that Chin must first give his conformity to the order of Jimin to pay. If he will reject that command of Jimin to pay, then he remains as a drawee. And anong sinabi ko? If he remains as a drawee, if he will not accept the order of Jimin to pay, he has no liability on the instrument. Why is that? Because a drawee is a person who has no liability. He is not liable until it's time that he will accept the unconditional order of the drawer to pay the payer or the order of the payer or the bearer of that bill of exchange. This brings me to a special kind of bill of exchange, and that is a check. Check is a bill of exchange drawn on a bank payable on demand. So, how will I distinguish check from a bill of exchange? Well, if the drawee is a bank, then you are certain that it is a check. But if the drawee is a person, a natural person, then that is considered a bill of exchange. Let's look on this example. Similarly worded with our bill of exchange, but what's the difference if you notice? Our drawee here is no longer Jin. It is already a bank because a check is a bill of exchange that is always drawn on a bank. And in our example, we have made use BDO as the drawee of the instrument. So we are certain that it is a check. Other topics will be discussed by the next reporters. Thank you and good evening.
Hi everyone, I am Arlene T. Pidlawan and I will be discussing the methods of transferring a negotiable instrument on how the negotiable instrument are being transferred. So let's start. There are three methods of transferring a negotiable instrument. We have issue, assignment, and negotiation. But let us just focus on the two methods of transferring a negotiable instrument, the negotiation and assignment, because usually the transfer of negotiable instrument to one person to another happens by way of either negotiation or assignment. Further, a negotiable instrument is negotiated by delivery or endorsement and delivery. But first, let's talk about issue. It is the first delivery of the instrument complete in form to a person who takes it as a holder. Ito yung unang transfer ng negotiable instrument to a payee or holder. A negotiable instrument's legal life does not begin until it is issued by the maker or drawer to the first holder. In short, ito yung pinakaunang transfer ng negotiable instrument sa pinakaunang holder. So next is assignment. What is this assignment all about? Assignment is a transfer of ownership by a registered and written document such as transfer deed under the provision of the Transfer of Property Act 1882. By the term assignment, we mean ito yung transfer ng contractual rights, ownership ng property, or interest by a person in order to realize the debt. So, dito sa assignment, yung transfer ng property or yung ownership ng property is only fulfilled by way of written document. Transfer by assignment takes place when the holder of negotiable instrument sells his right to another person without endorsing it for the purpose of receiving that payment. So, yung transfer ng assignment takes place kapag yung holder ng negotiable instrument is benenta niya yung right niya to another person without endorsing or sign. For the purpose nga na to receive that payment or to realize the debt. The assignee is entitled to get possession and can recover the amount due on the instrument from the parties thereto. So, sabi ko nga kanina yung assignment, ito yung written transfer ng rights or property na kung saan yung assignor is itra-transfer niya yung instrument niya kay assignee with the aim of conferring or to give the right on the assignee. Ibigay niya yung right niya kay assignee by signing an agreement called assignment deed. Thus, the assignee is entitled to receive the amount due on the negotiable instrument from the liable parties. The third method of transferring a negotiable instrument is negotiation. What constitutes negotiation? Under Section 30 of the Negotiable Instrument Law, an instrument is negotiated when it is transferred from one person to another in such manner as to constitute the transferee the holder thereof. If payable to bearer, it is negotiated by delivery. If payable to order, it is negotiated by endorsement of the holder completed by delivery. Dito sa negotiation, you will transfer the instrument purposely to make the transferee as a holder of instrument. According to Section 14 of the Negotiable Instrument Act of 1881, when a promissory note, bill of exchange, or check is transferred to any person, the holder thereof, the instrument is said to be negotiated. Ang main purpose or essence ng negotiation is gawing holder ng instrument yung transferee. There is no negotiation if the transfer does not make the transferee the holder of the instrument. Negotiation requires two conditions to be fulfilled. Dapat itong dalawang condition na ito is present para ma-fulfill or masabing may negotiation na naganap. Number 1 is there must be a transfer of the instrument to another person. Second is the transfer must be made in such a manner to as constitute the transferee the holder of the instrument. Handing over a negotiable instrument to a servant for safe custody is not negotiation. There must be a transfer with an intention to pass title para masabing may negotiation. There are two ways or modes of negotiation to transfer a negotiable instrument. Letter A is negotiation by delivery. It is applicable if the instrument is payable to bearer. Letter B is negotiation by endorsement and delivery. It is applicable if the instrument is payable to order. So, ano nga ba yung pinagkaiba nitong dalawa? So, tignan natin. So, letter A, negotiation by delivery, by where a promissory note or bill of exchange or a check is payable to a bearer, it may be negotiated by delivery thereof. Sabi ko nga kanina na negotiation by delivery is applicable if the instrument is payable to bearer. So, what does it mean? When an instrument is payable to bearer, it means whoever holds the instrument can receive the funds due on it. It states that the instrument is payable to or to the order of cash or otherwise indicates that it is not payable to an identified person. Since it is not payable to an identified person or a specific person, it does not require the signature of the transferor and the transferee becomes the holder thereof by mere possession. For example, A. The holder of a negotiable instrument payable to bearer delivers it to B's agent to keep it for B. The instrument now gets negotiated once the delivery happens. Thus, it can be seen that an instrument gets negotiated by mere delivery. It is not necessary that the signature of the transferor is required. the transferee becomes the holder by mere possession of the instrument. Thus, the delivery is important. Negotiation by endorsement and delivery. A promissory note, check, or bill of exchange payable to order can be negotiated only by endorsement and delivery. This is applicable when the instrument is payable to order. Payable to order means to be paid only to a specific payee. A promise or order that is payable to order is payable to the identified or specific person. So kanina, yung payable to bearer is an identified person. Dito naman sa payable to order is specific or identified person. After the holder signs his endorsement of the instrument and deliver it, the transferee becomes the holder. So, take note that mere endorsement is not sufficient. There must be delivery also. Dapat magkasama yung dalawa, endorsement and delivery. Since kanina ko pa sinasabi yung term na delivery, what is the importance of the term delivery in negotiation? The term delivery is very important in negotiation because first, delivery here means actual or constructive delivery with an intention of transferring property in the instrument. What is the difference between actual and constructive delivery? Actual delivery meaning the negotiable instrument is handed directly from one person to another, while constructive, the delivery happens without passing over the actual possession. Rather, the instrument is delivered to the servant, agent, or clerk of the transferee, who holds the instrument on behalf of transferee. Second is delivery made voluntarily with the intention of transferring the ownership of the instrument to the transferee is very essential. Mere delivery without the intention of passing the property is not sufficient to constitute a complete negotiation. If the instrument is executed but is not delivered, there is no negotiation. I will not further elaborate or discuss this because it's understandable naman. Example, a person executed a promissory note but died before delivering it to the payee. The promissory note was found in his papers and it was delivered to the endorsed. So, the instrument is executed or the promissory note is executed but is not delivered. Therefore, there is no negotiation and payee cannot recover the amount. So, therefore, delivery has to happen with the intention of passing over the ownership of the instrument to the person. A delivery is an essential condition in order to complete any contract on a negotiable instrument. So now, I want you to know the difference between assignment and negotiation. In assignment, the assigner will deliver the instrument to a person known as the assignee. You have to take note that in assignment, whatever the assigner writes has in the instrument, the same kind of title will also be given to an assignee. So, anong ibig sabihin nun? It means that if the assigner has a defective title, then the assignee gets a defective title. If the assigner has a good title, then the assignee will acquire also a good title. In other words, you are just reflecting the kind of title that you have in your instrument. So, if you're going to relate this one with law on sales, this is what we call now a mirror principle. Whatever kind of title what you have, that's the kind of title will also transferring to the vendee. If you have a good title, you will transfer a good title. If you have a defective title, then you will be transferring a defective title. Parang ganun yung concept natin when it comes in assignment. Kung good title ka, good title din ibibigay mo. Kung defective title ka, defective title din ang tatanggapin sa'yo. But, What about when it comes to a negotiation? Kapag negotiation yan, ano mangyayari? Are you still reflecting the kind of title what you have? Will you be transferring also the same kind of title? Same nature of title to your holder, to your transferee? Well, let us see. In negotiation, as long as you complied with the same, halimbawa, payable to bearer yan, then the proper way on how to negotiate it would be by the way of delivery alone. Whereas if it is payable to order instrument, then the proper way on how to negotiate it would be endorsement completed by delivery. If that will be the case, for example, the endorser, so yung nag-transfer, if the endorser has a defective title, what kind of title will be given to the endorsee? Would it be also a defective title? Or would it be a good title? In this particular situation, if the endorser has a defective title, do not initiate or conclude that the title would be transferred to the endorsee would be defective title. Why is that? Because in this situation, the endorsee will be evaluated independently from the kind of title that the endorser has. What do I mean with that? It means that before you can conclude what kind of title will be transferred by the endorser to the endorsee, you have to note whether or not your endorsee is a holder in due course or not in due course. Anong ibig sabihin nun? If your endorsee is a holder in due course, then the endorsee acquire good title. If the endorsee is a holder not in due course, then that's the time he will acquire a defective title. Ang point natin dito, the title of the endorsee does not depend on the kind of title that endorser has in the instrument. So, how about if the endorser has a good title? Does automatically mean that our endorsee would also acquire a good title? Well, again, just like what we have earlier said, if the endorsee is a holder in due course, then he will be acquiring a good title. But if the endorsee is a holder not in due course, the endorsee would be acquiring a defective title. So, yung kind of title ni endorsee does not depend upon the kind of title that endorser has in the instrument. Unlike in assignment that if the assigner has a defective title, automatic yan, assignee will also have a defective title. So therefore, the difference between negotiation and assignment is that negotiation refers to the transfer of the negotiable instrument by a person to another to make the person the holder of it, while in assignment, it implies the transfer of rights by a person to another for the purpose of receiving the debt payment. In assignment, the assigner will just transfer that instrument to another, and that the person whom you have given that instrument will just known as mere assignee, while in negotiation, the transferee of that instrument will not be known as mere assignee, rather he would be known as a holder of that instrument. When it comes to regulation of negotiable instrument, negotiation is governs the negotiable instrument 1881, while in assignment is regulated by Transfer of Property Act of 1882. As to effect, negotiation can be effected by mere delivery in case of bearer instrument and endorsement and delivery in case of order instrument. Conversely, the assignment is effected by written agreement to be signed by the transferor both in the case of order and bearer instrument. As to title, transferee gets a right of holder in due course, while in assignment, assignee's title is subject to the title of assigner. In negotiation, if the endorsee is a holder in due course, then he will be acquiring a good title, But if the endorsee is a holder not in due course, the endorsee would be acquiring a defective title. So yung kind of title ni endorsee does not depend upon the kind of title that endorser has in the instrument. Unlike in assignment that if the assigner has a defective title, automatic yan si assignee will also have a defective title. As to notice of transfer, there is no requirement of transfer notice in negotiation. On the contrary, notice of assignment is compulsory so as to bind the debtor. Right to sue. In negotiation, the transferee has the right to sue the third party in his or her own name. As against, in the assignment, the assignee does not have any right to sue the third party in his or her own name. As to consideration, in negotiation, the consideration is always presumed, whereas in the case of assignment, the consideration is proved or not presumed. To conclude, negotiable instruments are transferable. The process of transferring the title is called negotiated at or after maturity. It can be transferred by negotiation or by assignment. Both negotiation and assignment requires delivery to effect a transfer of the instrument.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kitalin Ablay, and my discussion for today are types of negotiation, difference between distributive and integrative negotiation, negotiation to payee, rights to the prior party to negotiate, and limitation on the negotiation. There are two types of negotiation. Una is distributive. Ano nga bang distributive? Bago tayo pumunta sa meaning, gumawa muna tayo ng example. Meron tayong seller, meron din tayong buyer. Ang seller natin ay si Mr. Saladino. Si Mr. Saladino ay nagbebenta ng kotse na nagkakahalagang 2 million pesos. At ang kanyang buyer ay si Miss Asiling. Si Miss Asiling ay bibili ng kotse kay Mr. Saladino. Pero kulang ang pera ni Miss Asiling. Ang pera lamang niya ay 1,500,000. Ngayon, dahil hindi nabili ni Miss Asiling ang kotse, si Miss Asiling ay maghahanap ng panibagong seller na nagbebenta ng kotse. At yun ay si Miss Maninga. Si Miss Maninga ay nagbebenta rin ng kotse na mas mababa sa binibenta ni Mr. Saladino. Ang presyo lamang ng kanyang kotse ay 1,800,000. Ngayon, alam natin na 1,500,000 lang ang pera ni Miss Asiling. Nakiusap si Miss Asiling kay Miss Maningas kung pwedeng bawasan ang presyo ng kotse. Pero hindi pumayag si Miss Maningas. So, ano nga ba ang distributive? Distributive negotiation, also known as win and lose, which one party wins and get what it needs while the other party loses and must give up something. Katulad dun sa example, si buyer will try to reduce the price as much as possible, pero si seller will try to get as much as possible. Kaya hindi pumayag dito ang dalawang buyer kay Miss Asiling, kasi si Miss Asiling hindi pumayag dun sa gusto ng seller na presyo. Pangalawa, integrative. Punta tayo ulit sa example. Meron tayong seller, meron tayong buyer. Ang seller natin ay si Miss Pidlawan at ang buyer natin ay si Miss Espinas. Si Miss Pidlawan ay nagbebenta ng bahay na nagkakahalagang 10 million. At si Miss Espinas, ang kanyang pera lamang ay 9 million. Ngayon, si Miss Espinas ay nakipag-usap kay Miss Pidlawan kung pwedeng babaan ang presyo ng bahay. Ang sabi ni Miss Espinas, kung pwede, 9,500,000 na lang ang bahay. Pero hindi pumayag si Miss Pidlawan na 9,500,000. Sabi niya, 9,600,000. At doon, isip ngayon si Miss Espinas kung Igagrab niya ba ang 9,600,000? Iisipin niya kung worth it ba yung 600,000 na idadagdag niya doon sa kanyang pera. At once na nag-agree na silang dalawa sa 9,600,000, masasabi na yung integrative negotiation ay win-win. So, integrative negotiation is also known as win-win. It requires the party involved to arrive at the solution which makes everyone a winner. So, merong consideration kanina, merong bargain na naganap. This means that each team achieving what they want. Katulad dun sa example, na si seller nag-agree dun sa price nang hindi naman siya malulugi at yung buyer ay bibili ng bahay na masasatisfied naman siya at magiging worth it yung binayad niya. Punta naman tayo para mas lalo nating maintindihan ang distributive at integrative. Dumako naman tayo sa difference ng dalawa. Meron tayong basis of difference, relationship, consideration, aim to gain, strategy, and outcome. So, relationship, short duration and long duration. Pagsabayin na natin yung sa relationship ang consideration. So, si distributive, short duration siya and individual consideration siya kasi it involves discussion only one issue at the time. So, usually, nag-a-approach sila is one at the time relationship between the two people. Kasi once na di nag-agree si buyer and the seller, maghanap ng iba si buyer. So, end of conversation na. Kaya short-term duration lang siya. Integrative negotiation, ang relationship niya is long-term duration at yung consideration naman niya is all parties to negotiate. So, all parties to negotiate kasi it involves discussion of a several issue at the time. Marami ng tinatakel. At dahil doon, dahil sa mahabang pag-uusap ni buyer at seller, nagkakaroon ng long duration. Yung long duration dito is usually it approach used in the continuing relationship between the two people. At dahil parehas na nag-agree si seller and the buyer, may terms and condition na minsan ay binibigay ni seller kay buyer. Next, aim to gain. Distributive is to win the negotiation. So, distributive is to win the negotiation. Kasi, yung main focus kasi ni distributive is the party sees is on their possession. They use pressure to get what they want. And each party expresses a strong position for each issue. Next, kay integrative, to obtain the mutual consent. Each party is expressed and try to come up with any option as possible per issue to maximize the mutual gains. Next, strategy. Kay distributive is win-oriented. Win-oriented because it involves party to keep their respective interests hidden. Also, it involves parties to keep information hidden. The integrative is the consensus-oriented. So, it involves the parties share their respective interests with other party. Parties share information with each other and try to get the root cause of why, of the existence of the issue. Next, the outcome. Alam na natin kanina kung bakit siya naging win-lose, si distributive, and win-win naman kay integrative. Ngayon, dumako naman tayo kay negotiation to a payee. Meron tayong tatlo na negotiation to payee. Una is the first delivery of the instrument to the payee. It believes that the payee as the first holder and acquires the title of the instrument, not by negotiation, but the issue or issuance. What if kung si negotiation? Paano yung title ng instrument? So, kapag si negotiation is already completed, executed, or issued to the instrument, The only holder subsequent to the payee can acquire title by the negotiation. This should be the rule in case of the first delivery of the negotiation is made by the maker or the drawee directly to the payee. Second is the first delivery of instrument to the other party. If the delivery is not so made, such delivery as the qualification of Section 191, Paragraph 10, issue, may constitute negotiation under Section 30 in relation to Section 191, Paragraph 7, holder. So, where delivery by the maker or the drawee is made to the person other than the payee, such as agent of the maker or drawer, the payee acquires the title by negotiation. Next, delivery of instrument to the payee by the last holder. There must also be negotiation to the payee when the instrument is delivered back to him by the last holder. There may also be negotiation to the payee when the instrument is delivered back to him by the last holder. In such case, endorsements of the last holder is not necessary because the payee is remitted to his former rights and all intervening parties are discharged for liability. Next is the rights to the prior party. Under Section 50, refer the acquirer or a holder who negotiates an instrument and then subsequently reacquires it under Section 58 to 59 and 121. If a prior party requires an instrument before the maturity, he may not liable the same further. If the prior party reacquires an instrument before maturity, he may negotiate the same further. But after paying the holder, he may not claim payment from any of the intervening parties. This is to avoid multiplicity of suit. Next is limitation of renegotiation. So, in the following cases, a prior party cannot further negotiate the instrument. First is where is the payable to the order of the third party and has been paid by the drawer. We under Section 121. And it was made or accepted for accommodation and has been paid by the party accommodated. The payment after the maturity by a party secondarily liable does not discharge the instrument. It only cancels his own liability and that of parties subsequent to him. With the respect of the prior party, primary and secondary, the reacquirer for the most part is remitted to his former position. And he may strike out his own and all subsequent endorsements, as they are not necessary to his title. If the party so paying was formerly a holder in due course, he may recover from the prior parties as such a holder even though at the time he already had notice of defense. Number 3, in order cases where the instrument is discharged when acquired by a prior party. So, madidiscuss kung ano dito yung discharge of negotiation para ma-renegotiate yung instrument. So, thank you for listening.
So hi everyone, I am Mark Jumbel H. Saladino and I am going to discuss the endorsement of negotiable instrument law. So, endorsement. How will you make the endorsement? Anong mga principles ang dapat gawin o tandaan pagdating sa endorsement? First, endorsement must be written on the instrument itself or dorsal portion. Dorsal portion means to the back of the note. Even if the law states that the endorsement shall be placed on the dorsal portion of the instrument, is it possible that the endorsement will likewise be placed to front or on the front of the note? Yes, pwede. Matatawag ka lang na irregular endorser Kumbaga, hindi ikaw ang acceptor ng instrument. But the general rule natin is on the dorsal portion ng instrument. Ngayon, paano kung ang dorsal portion is puno na ng pirma or numerous endorsement? Marami ng pirma doon sa likod ng instrument, wala nang malalagyan yung likuran ng endorsement. Is it possible to place your endorsement to a separate piece of paper? Yes, ito yung tinatawag nating allonge. Allonge refers to a piece of paper that has been securely attached to endorsement. This is considered a proper endorsement. Ano pang mga dapat tandaan na principle when it comes to endorsement? Note, signature of endorser alone without any additional word is proper endorsement, aka blank endorsement. Pirma lang ng endorser is enough na matatawag natin yung proper endorsement. That is a blank endorsement. Endorsement by rubber stamp. Pwede ba yan? Tinatamad ka pumirma kaya tatak-tatak na lang. Is this allowed? Yes, allowed as the law does not prohibit endorsement by rubber stamp. Kapag silent ang batas, pwede yan. It is not prohibited. So next, let's proceed to the few rules of endorsement. Number 1, rule of endorsement must be of the entire instrument under Section 32 of Negotiable Instrument Law. In other words, you need to endorse the entire value of the instrument. Partial endorsement is not allowed except exception tayo. So the following do not operate as negotiation of the instrument. Letter A, endorsement which purports to transfer to the endorsee a part only of the amounts payable. This is to prevent multiplicity of suits. So may exception tayo dito sa naunang under sub A ng rule number 1. Yung exceptions is if the instrument has been paid in part, it may be endorsed as to receive due. So letter B, an endorsement which purports to transfer the instrument to 2 or more endorsees severally. So may illustration tayo para mas maintindihan natin yung number 1 rule. So, ito yung front portion. I promise to pay Zenon or order 10 million. Sign, Mike. Sa back portion, which is, nandito yung endorsement ni Zenon. So, ito yon. Alamin natin kung valid endorsement yung mga sumusunod na endorsement on the back portion relating sa illustration natin. So, number 1. Pay to Yeng 10 million. Sign, Zenon. Question. Is this a valid endorsement? Yes. Dahil yung endorsement is the whole instrument. Rule number 1, remember? It must be the entire instrument. So, number 2 is endorsement, pay to Yeng 7 million, sign Zenon. Question. Is this a valid endorsement? Not valid endorsement. Bakit? That is not a negotiation. It is a mere assignment. Number 3. Assuming the amount 3 million had already been paid on the instrument by Mike, the maker. So, ito yung endorsement. Pay to Yeng 7 million, sign Zenon. So, si maker, si Mike, yaran niya na yung 3 million. So, is this a valid endorsement? Yes. Remember the exception of the yung letter A na if the instrument has been paid in part, it may be endorsed as to the residual. So number 4 endorsement, pay to Yeng 7 million and to Ying 3 million. Sign Zenon. Question. Is this a valid endorsement? This is not a valid endorsement. Bakit? It transfer to 2 or more persons separately is not allowed. This is to prevent multiplicity. And last endorsement, pay to Yeng and Ying, sign Zenon. Question. Is this a valid endorsement? Yes. Dito, kung balak pa nila i-endorse ang instrument, Yeng and Ying must both endorse except dito na papasok yung rule number 2. So, ano yung rule number 2 natin? Yung rule number 2 natin is endorsement if instrument is payable to two or more person under Section 41 of the Negotiable Instrument Law. So, number 1, two or more payees endorses jointly. So, sa number 1 na ito, all payees or endorses must endorse the instrument except as follows. A. If the joint or endorses are partners. B. If one them is authorized to endorse for the others. So, para mas maintindihan natin yung yung exception number ay yung number 1, yung two or more payees or endorse jointly. Meron tayong illustration dito. So, front portion, may kita yun sa face of the instrument. I promise to pay Xenon and Cyril order of 1 million. Sign Mike. At the back portion, if Xenon and Cyril wish to endorse it to Yang, both of them must endorse, unless only one may endorse under any of the exemption, as follows. So, pay to Yang, yan na yung endorsement, sign Xenon, sign Cyril. Yun nga, may exemption. Ito yung exemption natin if the joint or endorses are partners and if one them is authorized to endorse for the others. So, number 2, under rule number 2 ng rules on endorsement, two or more pays severally. So, ibig sabihin nito, anyone may endorse the instrument. Question, is this a valid endorsement? So, merong iba't ibang view sa ganitong rule sa two or more pays severally. Yung first view, valid endorsement siya. Yung position of the endorser is the same as the position of two or more payees. So, better view which is adopted by most authors. So, ito yung mas tinatanggap na view when it comes to two or more payees severally when it comes to endorsement. Yung second view naman, not valid endorsement. Bakit? Hindi siya valid under Section 32. Ano ba yung Section 32 natin? It must be the entire instrument. Yun yung Section 32. So, next rule is endorsement made by cashier, Section 42. So, yung illustration natin is back of the instrument, pay to Sue, President, sign Xenon. So, if the negotiable instrument is drawn or endorsed to person as cashier or other fiscal officer of a bank or corporation, the instrument is deemed prima facie. Only prima facie payable to the bank or corporation of which he is an officer, and it may be further negotiated by endorsement of the bank or corporation or even of the officer, but that is only a disputable presumption and it may be proven by the cashier or fiscal officer that the instrument is negotiated to him or endorsed to them in their personal capacity. So, ano yung mga note? Ito yung note 1 and note 2. Yung note 1, where the instrument is payable to a cashier or holder of an office for the time being, said person can negotiate it or any other fiscal officer on the corporation. So, yun lang din yung sinabi ko kanina na about dito sa endorsement with representative ng cashier. So, note 2, it is a prima facie that the instrument is for the corporation and not for the person concerned in his or her private capacity. If the person wants to get it, then he should prove that it belongs to him and his private capacity. So, rule number 4, endorsement where name of payee or endorsee is misspelled. Section 43. The payee or endorsee may endorse the instrument as therein describing adding if he thinks fit his proper signature. So, para mas maintindihan natin yung illustration, thus, if the payee's name is Mike Floresio, but the surname is spelled Florescia dapat yan, yung example natin in the instrument, Mike Floresio may endorse as follows. Sign, Mike Florescia, yun yung maling spelling, or sign Mike Florescia, or sign Mike Floresio. So in this case, the name of the payee or the endorsing is misspelled when he endorsed it, further noticed by someone else. He may add his proper name. Yan yung nasa example. Yung proper name niya is Mike Floresio or signature. It is not mandatory rule on his part. If he wants, he can correct the name. So, yan yung rule number 4. Rule number 5, section 44, endorsement in representative capacity. So, ito yung mga illustration natin. I promise to pay Peter order 1 million, sign Mike as agent of Miles. I promise to pay Peter or order 1 million, sign Mike for Miles. I promise to pay Peter or order 1 million, sign Miles by Mike. So, yung note natin, this is the same with section 19 and 20. So, if a person is endorsing in a representative capacity, like agent, he may endorse it in such terms as to negate his personal liability. He won't be held liable on the instrument because he is only acting as a representative, so he just has to add words describing himself as agent, like yung ganyan yung sa illustration natin. So, presumption. So, hindi ko na masyadong i-discuss tong presumption kasi masyado nang marami yung endorsement. So, yung unang presumption is time of negotiation or endorsement under Section 45 and place of endorsement as to Section 46. So, yung mga parties involved, yung endorser and endorsee. Para mas madaling matandaan siya, yung endorser, siya yung nag-transfer nung instrument. While yung endorsee, siya naman yung nag-receive ng endorsement or nung instrument. So, let's proceed to the kinds of endorsement. So, kind of endorsement. Ang mga kinds of endorsement natin ay special endorsement, blank endorsement, conditional endorsement, restrictive endorsement, qualified endorsement, and facultative endorsement. So, yung inad ko na lang dito yung facultative endorsement. So, we will limiting the discussion to these 6 kinds of endorsement. So, mas mahalaga kasi yung mga principal endorsement para mas lalo natin tong matutunan. So, ano yung unang kinds of endorsement? So, ano yung special endorsement? Special endorsement specifies the person to whom or to whose order the instrument is to be payable. So, para mas maintindihan natin, illustration, yung front portion, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, signed Mike. Sa back portion, ito na yung yung place mo na yung endorsement, ganito naman yung nakasulat ngayon. Pay to Yeng, signed Xenon. So, dito, in-specifies talaga yung endorsee, which is si Yeng. So, notice guys, wala na yung word na order or yung word na negotiability. Pati rin yung amount sa endorsement. But it is standing the same. The instrument is still negotiable. Why is that? Limit your analysis on what is found on the front portion. As long as an instrument negotiable in its origin continues to be negotiable until it has been restrictively endorsed or discharged by payment or otherwise under Section 47. So how about the endorsement in blank? Kung sa special endorsement specifies the endorsee is clearly indicated. Yung blank endorsement is specifies no endorsee. Only signature of endorsers present. No additional word. So, para mas maintindihan natin, here again, the illustration. Front portion, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, signed Mike. At the back portion, where is indicated your endorsement, ganyan lang yung makikita nyo, signed Xenon. So, no additional word. Wala na rin yung pay to, ganyan-ganyan. It just signature alone of the endorsee. This is a blank endorsement. So, take note din guys, also there is an effect of a blank endorsement in a payable order instrument. Take note, this is a payable order instrument. Yang example natin. Considering that the only endorsement is a blank endorsement, what will happen to a payable order instrument? Section 9, instrument will be converted into bearer instrument because the only endorsement is a blank endorsement. Ngayon, is it possible to convert a blank endorsement into special endorsement? Yes, but how? By writing above the signature in blank a contract which is consistent with the character of the instrument. So, ito yung illustration natin para mas maintindihan. Yung sa front portion ng instrument, ganun pa rin. I promise to pay, send, or order 1 million. Pero kung i-convert mo yung blank endorsement into special endorsement, ganito yung yung endorsement sa likuran. Pay to Yeng, sign signature. So, maglalagay lang ako dyan ng pay to Yeng. Yan, nakalagay na yung contract written above the signature of blank. Sign senon, yung pirma ng endorser. So ngayon, hindi na siya blank endorsement but a special endorsement. Kung tinanong ka, is it possible to convert blank endorsement into special endorsement without changing anything on its face? Yes, by writing contract above the signature in blank. So next one is the conditional endorsement. Conditional endorsement, the endorsement, not the promise or order, is subject to a condition, event which may or may not happen. So, this endorsement, the instrument is not conditional. What is conditional here is the endorsement itself. So, illustration natin, face of the instrument, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, sign Mike. Yun. So, if you're going to notice, in the face of the instrument, it says, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, sign Mike. Meron bang condition dyan? Is there an event which may or may not happen? None. Because this is considered as payable on demand. No time for payment is expressed. But how about the back of the instrument? Kung saan nakalagay yung endorsement. Ganito ang nakasulat. Pay to Yeng if he will pass the CPA board exam or CPA board, sign Xenon. The phrase, if he will pass the CPA board, means that this endorsement is subject to an event which may or may not happen. It is now subject to a condition. The fact that this endorsement now bears or contains a conditional endorsement, it remains to be a negotiable instrument because sa simula pa lang, it is already a negotiable instrument. So, what will be the effect? In this particular case, itong illustration natin, kung ikaw si Xenon, yung endorser, you have two options. Yung number 1 option, wait for Yeng to fulfill the condition until she pass the CPA board. If she passed the CPA board, this is the time you will deliver the 1 million. Or yung option 2, hindi na lang hintayin. You will deliver right away the 1 million without waiting to Yeng to pass CPA board. If he did not pass, he must turn over the amount to Xenon. So, ayan yung conditional endorsement. So, next one na kinds ng endorsement is the restrictive endorsement. So, may kinds of restrictive endorsement. Yung una is prohibits the further negotiation of the instrument. Then number 2, constitute the endorsee the agent of the endorser. And last, yung number 3, vest the title in the endorsee in trust for or to use of some other person. So, note natin, But mere absence of words implying power to negotiate does not make an endorsement restrictive. So, dito kasi sa restrictive endorsement na to, may mga words or phrases tayong ginagamit para ma-classified siya as restrictive endorsement. So, pumunta tayo sa unang kinds ng restrictive endorsement. So, yung una, prohibits the further negotiation of the instrument. So, at the front portion, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million. Sign Mike. At the back portion, pay to Yeng only. Sign Sen. Then, dito sa unang kinds ng restrictive endorsement, yung inclusion of the word only, there is what we call now as restrictive endorsement. Because with the presence of the word only, yan yung nakasulat sa back portion, Yeng can no longer further negotiate the instrument to a third person. So, ano ba yung mga iba pang mga similar words na pwede rin gamitin aside sa only? So, pwede rin yung pay to Yeng and no one else. So, gamit yung mga ganong phrase, the negotiable character of the instrument has been destroyed. Then, further negotiation of the same shall no longer be allowed. So, the second kind of restrictive endorsement is to constitute the endorsee the agent of the endorser. So, ito yung agency type ng kinds of restrictive endorsement. So, illustration natin para mas maintindihan. At the front of the instrument, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million. Sign Mike. At the back of the endorsement of the instrument, rather, yan, yung nakalagay doon is pay to Yeng, my agent, sign Xenon. So, in this situation, Xenon is making Yeng as his own agent. So, if that will be the case, is it still possible for Yeng to further negotiate the instrument to another? Ang sagot doon is yes. Posible pa rin na si Yeng i-further negotiate yung instrument. Kung sa nauna, yung ito, prohibits the further negotiation of the instrument is prohibited. Dito, sa number 2 kinds ng restrictive endorsement, ano na siya, pwede pa rin siyang i-endorse or i-further negotiation ni Yeng. Uulitin ko. Sa prohibits the further negotiation of the instrument, hindi na, destroyed na kaagad yung yung negotiation. Hindi na pwedeng i-further negotiate ni Yeng yung instrument. While dito sa pangalawa, pwede pa. Let's proceed to the last kind of restrictive endorsement. So, vest the title in the endorsee in trust for or to use of some other person. So, illustration natin, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, sign Mike. At the back portion, pay to Yeng as trustee of Xeni, sign Mike. Tanong, can Yeng still later on negotiate this instrument? Yes, it is not prohibited. What is the effect? The right of the endorsees after Yeng will only similar to the rights of Yeng. So, in this case, you are actually making the endorsee as a trustee of that instrument or as a trustee of some other person. But take note again yung ito, but mere absence of the words implying power to negotiate does not make an endorsement restrictive. Always take note of that. So, if an instrument has been restrictively endorsed, ano ang mga rights ng restrictive endorsee? So, ito yon yung effects of restrictive endorsement under Section 37. Number 1, yung effect is restrictive endorsement confers upon the endorsee the right. Letter A, to receive payment of the instrument. Yung pangalawa, kung hindi ka pa rin binabayaran, you can bring any action thereon that the endorser could bring. And last, to transfer his rights as such endorsee where the form of the endorsement authorized him to do so. But all subsequent acquire only the title of the first endorsee under the restrictive endorsement. So next kind of endorsement is the qualified endorsement. Qualified endorsement constitutes the endorser a mere assigner of the title of the instrument. Your endorser is trying to limit the extent of his liability that he could be held liable kung merong violation of his warranties under Section 65. So, ito yung illustration natin. Face of the instrument. I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million signed Mike. At the back of the instrument, dyan mo ilalagay yung endorsement. So, pay to Yeng without recourse, sign Xenon, or pay to Yeng at endorsee's risk, sign Xenon. So, when you included without recourse, that's when we call a qualified endorsement. So, pwede rin yung ayan, yung pay to Yeng at endorsee's risk, sign Xenon. Same lang yan, qualified endorsement yan. So, yung last natin is yung facultative endorsement. So, what is facultative endorsement? Endorser enlarges his liability by waiving demand and notice of dishonor. Illustration. So, ganito yon. Kabaliktaran naman ito ng qualified endorsement. Yung qualified endorsement, your liability is restrictive. So, yung liability in facultative endorsement enlarge now the scope of that layap. Yan na yung sinasabing i-waive na yung rights to receive the notice of dishonor. So, madidiscuss ito furthermore by my co-reporter. So, ayan yung illustration natin. Front portion, I promise to pay Xenon or order 1 million, sign Mike. At the back portion, pay to Yeng, notice of dishonor, waive, sign Xenon. So, let's proceed to the endorsement of instrument payable to bearer. Where an instrument payable to bearer is endorsed especially, it may nevertheless be further negotiated by delivery, but person endorsing specially liable as endorser to only such holders as make title through his endorsement. So, nagre-refer to sa original payable to bearer. Hindi applicable dito yung converted bearer instrument. So, para mas maintindihan natin, ito yung illustration. So, si Mike, gumawa siya ng promissory note, in-address niya kay Peter or bearer. Then, si Peter or siya yung bearer, in-endorse na to kay Alpha. Then si Alpha, in-endorse na kay Bert. Then si Bert, in-endorse na kay Charlie. So, hindi ko na masyado siyang i-discuss kasi na-discuss naman to sa mga naunang part ng discussion ng buong report. So, ang next naman natin na discussion is the striking out endorsement under Section 48 ng Negotiable Instrument Law. So, meaning ng striking out endorsement is yung magre-remove ka ng endorsement. So, when can you remove the endorsement? The holder may at any time at any endorsement strike out any endorsement which is not necessary to his title. The endorser whose endorsement is struck out and all endorses subsequent to him are thereby relieved from liability on the instrument. So, ito na yung simplified rule of striking out of endorsement. Kasi sobrang haba niya sa libro. So, ito na yung pinaka-simpleng rule. The endorsee may at any time strike out any endorsement not necessary to his title. So, i-remove na lang yung mga endorsement na hindi naman talaga important sa kanyang title. So, things to remember. Ito yung mga dapat tandaan kapag mag-strike ka ng endorsement. First is to identify the nature of the instrument. So, may dalawa tayo. If bearer, if order. So, dito sa presentation na yan yung nasa presentation, ayan na yung pinaka-steps para, may struck out yung endorsement kung if bearer instrument or if order instrument. So, if bearer, all endorsement are not necessary to his title since a bearer instrument can be negotiated by mere delivery. So na-discuss naman na to ng mga naunang reporter, so hindi ko na to masyadong i-elaborate. So ayun yung step. So ang step naman sa kung order instrument, look for a blank endorsement and all endorsement after the blank endorsement can be struck out. Why? Because a blank endorsement has the effect of converting an order instrument to a bearer instrument. Once the instrument is now a bearer, it can now be negotiated by mere delivery. The subsequent endorsement after the blank endorsement are no longer necessary the title of the endorsee. So, para mas maintindihan natin ng mas maayos, so, ito yung una natin example. Kung yung nature ng instrument is payable to bearer. So, Mike, siya yung maker ng instrument. In-address niya kay Peter or siya yung bearer through special endorsement. So, in-endorse na kay Al pa rin through special endorsement. In-endorse na rin kay Bert through special endorsement. Then si Bert, in-endorse na rin kay Charlie, so siya na yung present holder. So, question. What endorsement can be struck out by Charlie? Is any? Ayan. So, yung answer, all special endorsement. Endorsement of Peter, Alpha, and Bert. So, bakit? Because the instrument is a bearer instrument and all endorsement are not necessary to his title. So, next na nature ng instrument is yung payable to order. Yung unang illustration natin, illustration number 1, ganun pa rin yung example. Mike, yung maker ng instrument, in-address na kay Peter. However, this is an order instrument through special endorsement. Then, in-endorse na kay Alpha through special endorsement. Then, in-endorse na ulit kay Bert through special endorsement. Then, in-endorse niya kay Charlie, siya na yung present holder. So, question. What endorsement can be struck out by Charlie? Is any? So, the answer is none. Bakit? Because the endorsement of Peter, Alpha, and Bert are all necessary to his title. So, illustration number 2. So, ganun pa rin yung nature ng instrument, payable order pa rin siya. Pero kung mapapansin nyo, yung pagkaka-endorse si Peter kay Alpha is through blank endorsement. So, after ni Alpha, in-endorse na kay Bert ng through special endorsement. Then, si Bert, in-endorse na kay Charlie, siya na yung present holder. So, what endorsement can be struck out by Charlie? Is any? Ang answer is the special endorsement of Bert only. Bakit? This is because the blank endorsement of Alpha to Bert has the effect of converting the order instrument into bearer instrument, while in the possession of Alpha. This can now be negotiated by mere delivery. So, under Section 50, when prior party may negotiate the instrument, so ito parang yung illustration lang natin dito, parang bumalik lang yata, parang yung unang illustration, yung kay Alpha, yung endorsement ni Alpha, bumalik lang ulit din sa kanya yung instrument. Sa illustration number 2, yung maker naman, then in-endorse niya ng in-endorse, bumalik lang ulit sa kanya yung endorsement. So, ayun lang yung when prior party may negotiate the instrument under Section 50 ng Negotiable Instrument Law. So, that's all. Thank you.
Hello guys, I'm Cheriel Maningas and I will be discussing about the discharge of negotiable instrument, specifically Section 119 to Section 122, and the subsequent section will be discussed by the next reporter. Hope you will learn something. Thank you. So first, let us recall what is negotiable instrument. So negotiable instrument is a signed document that promises a sum of payment to a specified person or the assignee. Common examples are checks, money orders, and promissory notes. So we already know what negotiable instrument means. Then without further ado, let's go on to discharge of negotiable instrument. So discharge means release from an obligation. When a negotiable instrument is issued, it carries a liability to pay certain amount to the holder. When the liability is satisfied, the instrument is said to be discharged. So ibig sabihin lang ng discharge ay wala ka ng obligation kay creditor or holder kasi nabayaran mo na. So kapag wala ka ng liability kay holder kasi na-satisfied mo na, ang tawag doon ay discharge of negotiable instrument. Pero guys, take note, under section 119 to 125, there are instances na may ibang dahilan kaya nadi-discharge ang instrument, and I and Miss Asiling will be discussing that in a while. In addition, discharge of an instrument is the release of all parties, whether primary or secondary liable. It renders the instrument without force and it can no longer be negotiated. Let's discuss paano nga ba or ano nga ba yung mga instances kung bakit nadi-discharge ang negotiable instrument. Let's move on to section 119 on how instrument is discharged. Letter A. By payment in due course by or on behalf of the principal debtor. So take note guys, under section 88 of negotiable instrument law, kailangan una, magbayad at or after maturity of the instrument. Pangalawa, kailangan din si holder mismo ang nagbayad. And panghuli, kailangang nagbayad si principal debtor in good faith without notice that the holder's title is defective. O ibig sabihin, walang naging problema sa agreement ni principal debtor at holder. In addition, principal debtor is the person ultimately liable to pay the debt. Siya yung taong nakalagay sa instrument na magbabayad ng utang in the future. Letter B. By payment in due course by the party accommodated, where the instrument is made or accepted for accommodation. First, the party accommodated is the real debtor. Hence, payment by him in due course discharges the instrument. Second, if payment is made by the accommodation party, the instrument is not discharged since he can still go after the reimbursement. So dito, kapag si party accommodated, which is the real debtor or principal debtor ang nagbayad, is automatic madi-discharge ang instrument. Pero kapag si accommodation party ang nagbayad, ay hindi madi-discharge ang instrument kasi pwede pa siyang humingi ng reimbursement kay accommodated party. So medyo nakakalito kaya ulitin natin. Yung accommodated party, siya yung principal debtor o yung ultimate liable na bayaran yung utang. While yung accommodation party, siya yung third person na nakasign sa document or instrument wherein pumayag siya na gamitin yung pangalan niya ni accommodated party. Simply, siya yung guarantor na kapag hindi nakapagbayad si accommodated party, ay may karapatan si holder na siya ang singilin. In short, accommodated party is the principal debtor, while accommodation party is the guarantor or surety. Letter C. By the intentional cancellation thereof by the holder. So, intentional cancellation, pwedeng ma-discharge ang instrument sa paglalagay ng cancelled or paid or drawing across the face of the instrument. Pwede rin kapag nasira, nasunog, or napunit ang negotiable instrument. Letter D. By any other act which will discharge simple contract for the payment of money. Sa oblicon, merong extinguishment of obligation under Chapter 4. So, according to Article 1231 of Civil Code, so first, is by payment or performance. So, ito yung pagbabayad or pagtupad sa obligasyon. Second, by the loss of the thing due o kapag nawala or nasira. Third, by the condonation or remission of the debt. Ito ay kapag inabandon na or dinonate na lamang ni holder kay principal debtor ang utang kasi alam niya na hindi na ito kayang bayaran pa. Fourth, by the confusion or merger of the rights of the debtor. So dito, the debtor becomes the creditor since one cannot claim against himself. And lastly, by novation. Ibig sabihin nito ay nagkaroon ng bagong agreement or pagpapalit ng lumang kontrata upang baguhin ito. Letter E. When the principal debtor becomes the holder of the instrument at or after maturity in his own right. So tinutukoy rin ito ang merger or confusion wherein naging creditor si debtor. So may tatlong reacquisition para mangyari ito under Article 1275 of Civil Code. First, by the principal debtor, second, in his own right, and lastly, at or after the date of maturity. For example, Singto makes a note payable to the order of Chris. Chris endorses the note to Tay, Tay to Newey, Newey to Gan, and Gan to Off, where Gan endorses the note to Singto as follows: pay Singto for collection. Assuming Gan endorsement to Singto was made at or after maturity, was the instrument discharged? The answer is no. Hindi. Hindi kasi hindi si Singto yung principal debtor at agent lang siya ni Gan. As one of the reacquisition, kailangan principal debtor, so hindi niya na-fulfill yun kasi representative capacity lang siya. At hindi niya rin na-fulfill ang in his own right. Though he satisfied the third one, which is at or after the date of the maturity, still the instrument is not discharged. Second example is, suppose the endorsement by Bright to Win was pay to win. Was the instrument discharged? The answer is yes. Oo, kasi napulpil lahat ni Bright ang reacquisition, which is siya yung principal debtor in his own right and at or after the maturity, meaning pag in-endorse ni Bright kay Win ang instrument, automatic magiging holder si Win. Next is Section 120, when persons secondarily liable on the instrument are discharged. Secondarily liable, ito yung drawer of a bill of exchange, endorser of a bill of exchange and promissory note, and persons negotiating by mere delivery a bill of exchange and promissory note. So letter A, by any act which discharges the instrument. So if the instrument is discharged through any act of the causes or nabanggit sa section 119, the secondarily liable are discharged. Letter B, by the intentional cancellation of his signature by the holder. So if the holder intentionally or strike out or pinatanggal ang signature of secondarily liable, then mawawalan na rin siya ng obligation sa instrument. Letter C, by the discharge of a prior party. So dito, holder renounces right against prior party. So prior party and subsequent parties will be discharged. Renunciation is nangyayari kapag napatunayang di na kayang bayaran ni principal debtor ang utang niya. So the holder will conduct renunciation. Renunciation will also discuss at section 122. So mayroong mga hindi included under this subsection. First, discharge by means of bankruptcy. Second, discharge by a party not given due notice of dishonor. And lastly, discharge by the statute of limitations. For example, issues a promissory note payable to the order of Fluke. Fluke endorses the note to Earth, Earth to Cow, Cow to Bond, and Bond to Frem. Frem renounces his right against Earth. So dito, nag-renounce si Frem ng right niya against Earth. So Earth and together with his subsequent parties na sina Cow, Bond, and Frem are not discharged from liability while Fluke is not. Second example is, Mew made a note payable to the order of Golf. Golf endorsed the note to Min, Min to Plan, Plan to Perth, Perth to Saint, and Saint to C. When C presented the note to Mew for payment on the date of maturity, Mew dishonored it. C gave a notice of dishonor to the parties secondarily liable, namely Min, Plan, Perth, and Saint, but not Golf. So Golf discharged pero sina Min, Plan, Perth, and Saint is not discharged kasi di ba nabanggit ko na hindi included ang notice of dishonor para ma-discharge ang instrument under prior party. Letter D, by a valid tender of payment made by a prior party. So dito may dalawang requisites. First, prior party makes a valid tender of payment, ibig sabihin kailangan payment is complete and in legal tender in order to discharge the instrument. Second, the holder refuses to accept the payment without just cause. Therefore, that the holder's refusal without justifiable reason to accept a valid tender of payment made by a prior party should discharge the subsequent parties. Letter E. By a release of the principal debtor unless the holder's right of recourse against the party secondarily liable is expressly reserved. Recourse, ito yung karapatan ni holder na magdemand ng payment kay secondarily liable or the person who signed the document. Meaning, yung accommodation party ang hahabulin ni holder para magbayad since ni-refuse or di kayang bayaran ni accommodated party or principal debtor. So una, kapag nirelease ni holder sa principal debtor sa obligation, automatic the subsequent parties will also be released and discharged from obligation. Second, kapag napagdesisyonan ni holder na i-recourse yung right against secondarily liable kaysa kay principal debtor, then secondarily liable will not be discharged. For example, suppose Chimon is the maker of an instrument payable to the order of Bloom, who endorsed it to Nanon, by Nanon to Drake, and by Drake to Frank, the present holder. So kapag nirelease ni Frank si Chimon, the subsequent parties will also be discharged. Pero kapag nirelease ni Frank si Chimon, but he expressly reserved his right against secondarily liable, then they are not discharged. Letter F. By any agreement binding upon the holder to extend the time of payment or to postpone the holder's right to enforce the instrument, unless made with the assent of the party secondarily liable or unless the right of recourse against such party is expressly reserved. It means agreement binding on the holder. So napagkasunduan ni holder at debtor na magkaroon ng extension of payment without prior knowledge of the guarantor or secondarily liable. Next is Section 121. Right of party who discharges instrument. Where the instrument is paid by a party secondarily liable thereon, it is not discharged. But the party so paying it is remitted to his former rights as regards all prior parties, and he may strike out his own and all subsequent endorsement and again negotiate the instrument. So dito, kapag si secondarily liable yung nagbayad, the instrument is not discharged. So ang epekto nito ay makakancel ang own liability ni secondarily liable and all the parties subsequent to him. And he may strike out or alisin yung signature nila, pero hindi pwedeng strike out in a certain exemption. First, where it is payable to the order of a third person and has been paid by the drawer. Second, where it was made or accepted for accommodation and has been paid by the party accommodated. Bakit? Kasi these two cases, the instrument will be discharged because the primarily liable already paid and there is no need to strike out the signature of the secondarily liable. For example, Tala is the drawer of a bill addressed to Coffer, the drawee, and payable to the order of Intouch. The bill is accepted by Ryan and endorsed by Intouch, Max, Tool, and Schnurler in succession. So kapag si Max ang nagbayad, the instrument will not discharge, but it discharges him, Tool, and Schnurler to whom he is personally liable. Then Max and his subsequent parties can strike out their signature. And Max has the right to sue Talay and Intouch and renegotiate. So kapag si Talay ang nagbayad, the case would fall under subsection A, which is where payable to the order of a third person and has been paid by the drawer. And kapag si Intouch naman ang nagbayad, it will fall under subsection B, which is where it was made or accepted for accommodation and has been paid by the party accommodated. Next is Section 122, Renunciation by Holder. The holder may expressly renounce his right against any party to the instrument before, at, or after its maturity. An absolute and unconditional renunciation of his right against the principal debtor made at or after the maturity of the instrument discharges the instrument. But a renunciation does not affect the rights of a holder in due course without notice. A renunciation must be in writing unless the instrument is delivered up to the person primarily liable thereon. Nabanggit na rin ito kanina under Section 120, subsection C. So ulitin ko, renunciation ay nangyayari kapag napatunayan ni holder na hindi na magbabayad o hindi na kayang bayaran ni debtor yung utang niya. Pwede itong mangyari before or at the time of the performance, and it must be in written, and it is either in favor of a secondary or favor and principal debtor. Renunciation does not affect the rights of a holder in due course without notice. Ibig sabihin ng holder in due course without notice is hindi kailangan magbigay ng notice ni holder sa mga party liable sa instrument for transfer of rights by negotiation. Letter A renunciation in favor of a secondary party. It can be made at or after the maturity of the instrument. Ang epekto ay madi-discharge si secondarily liable and all the parties subsequent to him. Letter B, a renunciation in favor of the principal debtor. It may be effected at or after maturity. Ang epekto is madi-discharge si principal debtor and all parties. Sa A kasi, hindi kasamang madi-discharge sa principal debtor, wherein sa B, kasama na siya. For example, Kellen is the holder of an instrument made by Paulo and endorsed in succession by Bester, Philip, Justin, and Julian. If Colin renounces his right against Justin, then Justin and Julian are discharged because it can fall under subsection A, wherein it discharges the secondary liable and all the parties subsequent to him. Then Colin makes renunciation to Paulo, then all parties are discharged under subsection B, where principal debtor and all parties will be discharged. Then if Colin renegotiate to other party named Jos, a holder in due course without notice, then the instrument can still enforce.
Hi guys, I'm Arjula Shane Diaz-Siling and I will be discussing the Section 123 to Section 124 of the Negotiable Instrument Law. First off, before we proceed discussing Section 123 of Negotiable Instrument, kailangan natin malaman what does cancellation means. According to my friend Merriam-Webster, cancellation from the word cancel. It is to decide not to conduct or perform something planned or expected, or to destroy the force, effectiveness, or validity of a contract. So if ang isang instrument, can be a promissory note or bill of exchange, was cancelled, ang mga nakasulat na doon will be ineffective na. Pero sabi nga sa Section 123, cancellation, unintentional, burden of proof. A cancellation made unintentionally or under a mistake or without the authority of the holder is inoperative. But where an instrument or any signature thereon appears to have been cancelled, the burden of proof lies on the party who alleges that the cancellation was made unintentionally or under a mistake or without authority. So, to understand the Section 123 more, ano muna yung burden of proof? Burden of proof is a legal standard that requires parties to demonstrate that a claim is valid or invalid based on facts and evidence presented. Ang burden of proof determines which party is responsible for putting forth evidence and the level of evidence they must provide in order to prevail on their claim. In most cases, the plaintiff, yung party bringing the claim, has the burden of proof. Ibig sabihin, ang burden of proof ay responsibility nung party na nagka-claim na ang cancellation is inoperative because it was made unintentionally or under mistake or without the authority of the holder. So in simple words, sabi sa Section 123 of Negotiable Instrument Law, pag ang cancellation made ay hindi intentional, ang burden of proof is upon the person who claims that the cancellation is inoperative. Going back sa meaning of cancellation, ang cancellation hindi lang limited sa pagsulat ng word na cancelled or paid or sa pag-drawing lang ng crisscross lines or X sa instrument. It includes steering, erasure, obliteration, meaning pag-remove ng some parts ng content nito, or burning, pagsunog sa mismong instrument. May iba pang other means to cancel the instrument, basta dapat ang intention to cancel is evident. When cancellation is inoperative, kailan daw ang cancellation of the instrument is void or ineffective? Walang effect, ganun. Kailan nangyayari? Sabi number 1, when made unintentionally. Ibig sabihin, na-cancel mo na di mo naman talaga purpose or intent to cancel it. Number 2, when made under mistake. Aksidente mong na-cancel. Nagkamali ka lang. Number 3, when made without the authority of the holder. But wait. Ang sabi, cancellation, however, is presumed to be intentional. So, pag may cancellation na ganap sa instrument, iisipin agad, okay guys, intentional to, kinancel na. Hence, the burden is on the holder claiming its ineffectiveness to overcome the presumption by contrary to proof. So, ayun nga yung sinabi natin kanina, burden of proof nung nag-claim na hindi ito ginawa intentionally. Section 124, Alteration of Instrument, Effect of. Where a negotiable instrument is materially altered without the assent of all parties liable thereon, it is avoided, except as against a party who has himself made, authorized, or assented to the alteration, and subsequent endorsers. Sinasabi dito sa first paragraph ng Section 124 of Negotiable Instrument kapag ang negotiable instrument is materially altered nang walang approval ng mga parties na liable under doon sa negotiable instrument, it is void or avoided, meaning madi-discharge sila sa kanilang liability. Hindi silang magbabayad, except doon sa mga party na mismong nag-alter ng instrument, nag-authorize ng alteration, or nag-approve doon sa alteration. Kasama na rin doon ng mga subsequent endorsers. Mamaya, madidiscuss natin bakit kasama pa ang mga subsequent endorsers na magiging liable. Second paragraph ng Section 124, but when an instrument has been materially altered and is in the hands of a holder in due course, not a party to the alteration, he may enforce payment thereof according to its original tenor. Ang sabi dito, pero kapag daw ang instrument has been materially altered and hawak na ni holder, which is a holder in due course, ang ibig sabihin, pag holder in due course, itong holder na ito ay hindi party to the alteration or kasama nung mga nag-alter. Walang kinalaman sa alteration, ganon. So, si holder in due course, he may enforce payment dun kay party na liable, yung talagang payer na naka-mention sa instrument according to its original tenor. Meaning, yung mismong amount na sinulat ni maker sa instrument bago ito na-alter. Okay, so let's move on. To understand more yung Section 124, alamin natin ano yung material alteration. So, ano nga ba ang material alteration? Material alteration, definition, an alteration which in any way alters the operation of the instrument and the liabilities of the parties or which alters the business effect of the instrument is a material alteration. So, sa madaling salita, ang material alteration is any change in the instrument which affects or changes the liability ng mga parties as specified sa Section 125 or changes the contract of the parties. Section 125 of Negotiable Instrument Law. What constitutes a material alteration? Any alteration which changes the number 1, the date. Under dito, a change in the date of the instrument, whether pinaaga or pinostpone yung time of payment, it is material alteration. O kaya naman, a change in the date kung kailan mag-i-start o magkakaroon ng interest. Pero, yung change in the date of endorsement is not material alteration. where the date is not necessary to fix the maturity of the instrument, unless the issue is whether the instrument was made before or after maturity. Number 2, the sum payable, either for principal or for interest. Dito, like any change in the amount of the principal or interest, whether increasing or reducing, it is always material alteration. O kaya naman, the addition of the words with interest, with or without a fixed rate. Material alteration din yon. Pero kapag ang alteration ay alteration of the marginal figures ng instrument, ay hindi material alteration. Lalo na when the sum stated in words in the body remains unchanged naman. Number 3, the time or place of payment. Under sa time, example natin dito is yung change in the maturity of the instrument. Whether yung time of payment is pinaikse, meaning pinaaga, o kaya naman in-extend, material alteration yon. Under sa place of payment naman, ang alteration kung saan binago yung place of payment or nag-insert ng place of payment wherein wala naman talagang specified place na ilagay si maker, it is considered material alteration. Thus, the change of the place of payment, example, dapat sa Chinatown siya magbabayad, pero binago, ginawang sa BDO Bank, material alteration yon. Since si maker is deprived of the advantages under Section 70 of the instrument payable at a special place and possibly subject him to the disadvantages of an instrument payable at a bank. Number 4, the number or the relations of the parties. Example dito, addition of a co-maker or addition of the word surety. Sorry kung mali yung pagbanggit ko. Ito lang kasi alam ko eh. So, ayun nga, sabi, addition of the word surety after the name of a co-maker. Pag sinabi kasing surety, ikaw yung mag-a-assume or magte-take ng responsibility of paying the debts in case na yung debtor is unable to make payments. Isipin mo yon, wala naman kayong napag-usapang sasaluhin mo siya sa utang niya if ever di siya makabayad, pero ginawa kang surety, magugulat ka na lang, ikaw na yung sisingilin. So, other example, dinagdagan ng word na trustee after the name of the payee. Pag ganyan, ikaw na payee, imbis na sa'yo mapupunta yung siningil mo, dadaan lang sa'yo yung pera. Kasi kay beneficiary mapupunta pala yon. Iba pang example naman, binura yung pangalan ni payee tapos nag-insert ng pangalan ng ibang person or iniwan lang niya na blanco. So number 5, the medium or currency in which payment is to be made. Lahat ng changes sa medium or currency in which payment is to be made ay material alteration. Tulad na lang ng pag-insert or add of the words na in current funds or the words in gold coins, or kapag naman ang currency na nakalagay doon sa note payable is in pesos, meaning Philippine currency, then binago, ginawang payable in American dollars, material alteration yon. Number 6, any alteration which adds a place of payment where no place of payment is specified. Sabi na natin kanina yan. Number 7, any other change or addition which alters the effect of the instrument in any aspect. Other alteration aside sa mga nabanggit in respect to what constitutes a material alteration is considered yung material alteration. So, bago natin umpisahan ng effect of material alteration, alamin muna natin ano yung difference between the holder in due course and the holder not in due course in relation sa next topic natin, which is effect of material alteration. Ang ibibigay ko dito na explanation ng pagkakaiba nilang dalawa is brief lang to, kung saan ito ay konektado lang dun sa topic natin mamaya. So ito na nga, ang holder in due course, holder who has taken the instrument in good faith, kung saan at the time the instrument was negotiated to him, he had no notice of infirmity in the instrument or defect in the title of the person negotiating it. Section 52 yon. Guys, ibig sabihin, si holder in due course, wala siyang actual knowledge of the infirmity or defect or knowledge of such facts that his action in taking the instrument amounted to bad faith. In short, wala siyang alam na altered yung instrument na kinuha niya. While yung holder not in due course, dito, at the time the instrument is negotiated to him, na-notice niya or may knowledge siya na there is infirmity or defect yung instrument. In short, may alam siya na altered yung instrument. Now, alam na natin, let's proceed sa effect of material alteration. Effect of material alteration. A. In the hands of a holder not in due course, the instrument is avoided except as against, number 1, a party who has himself made, authorized, or assented to the alteration. Number 2, subsequent endorsers. Meron tayo ditong quotation which says na that the instrument is genuine and in all respect what it purports to be. Thus, if negotiated to a not a holder in due course, he cannot enforce payment against party prior to the alteration. He may, however, enforce payment according to the altered tenor from the person who caused the alteration and from the endorsers. Section 124 of Negotiable Instrument Law. Sabi dito, all prior parties who did not give their consent to such alteration will be discharged to their liability to pay. The holder cannot enforce payment even for the original tenor, except against doon sa mga party who made the alteration, nag-authorize ng alteration or nag-agree to the alteration, and to those subsequent endorsers. Ibig sabihin, si holder, he can enforce payment of the instrument in its altered tenor to them, meaning yung amount na binago nila. So, ang tanong, bakit kasama ang subsequent endorsers? Nag-endorse lang naman sila. Ang sagot, kasama ang mga subsequent endorsers na pwedeng singilin ni holder kasi the moment they endorse the altered instrument, they give warranty as endorsers that the instrument is genuine and in all respect what it purports to be. Yun yung kaninang binasa nating quotation. Meaning, they confirm kay holder na bona fide yung instrument. It is made in good faith without fraud or deceit. Regardless kung alam or hindi ni subsequent endorsers na altered yung instrument, he is liable pa rin as he warrants na the instrument is free from alteration. Letter B naman tayo. In the hands of a holder in due course, the instrument is not avoided. Number 1, as against a party prior to the alteration. The holder may enforce payment of the instrument according to its original tenor. Number 2, as against a party who has himself made, authorized, or assented to the alteration, or subsequent endorsers. The holder may enforce payment of the instrument according to its altered tenor by reason of their participation in the alteration or their warranties. Sabi dito sa letter B, dito, both the party prior to the alteration and the holder does not have knowledge na the instrument is materially altered. Thus, the instrument is not avoided. Si holder, he can enforce payment of the instrument kay party na walang kinalaman sa alteration, pero dapat according to its original tenor. Yung mismong halaga na isinulat ni maker sa instrument before it is altered. And then, the holder may enforce payment of the instrument din dun sa mga party na nag-alter ng instrument, nag-authorized, or nag-agree sa alteration, or sa mga subsequent endorsers according to the altered tenor naman. So, meron tayong example. Mark makes a note payable to the order of Arlene for 10,000 and delivers the same to Arlene. Without the consent of Mark, Arlene changed the amount to 40,000. Arlene then endorsed the note to Kit, Kit to Che, Che to Send, and Send to Gerald, holder. Against whom may Gerald enforce payment and how much? So, meron tayong A and B. Letter A, if Gerald is not a holder in due course, and letter B, if Gerald is a holder in due course. Sagutan natin ng letter A. So, ang sabi sa letter A, if Gerald was not a holder in due course, he can enforce payment of the instrument in its altered tenor 40,000 against Arlene since Arlene made the alteration and also by reason of her being an endorser subsequent to the alteration. He can likewise enforce payment of the instrument in its altered tenor, which is 40,000 then, against Kit, Che, and Sen for being endorsers subsequent to the alteration. However, he cannot enforce payment against Mark, whether according to its original or altered tenor, since the instrument is avoided as against Mark. Gets? So, dun naman tayo sa letter B. Ang sagot naman dito, if Gerald was a holder in due course, he can enforce payment against Mark in its original tenor, which is the 10,000. He can likewise enforce payment of the instrument in its altered tenor naman, which is 40,000, against Arlene, since Arlene made the alteration and as a subsequent endorsers. He can likewise enforce payment of the instrument in its altered tenor as against Kit, Che, and Sen for being endorsers subsequent to the alteration. So, ang dali lang ng ating example, no? Napaka-understandable. Ang tanong naman, paano kapag ang alteration was made by a stranger or ang tinatawag nilang spoliation? Ang sagot, when alteration was made by a stranger, the effect is the same as where the alteration is made by a party which a holder in due course can recover on the original tenor of the instrument. Section 124 of the Negotiable Instrument Law. Dumako naman tayo sa ating last topic, which is the immaterial alteration. An immaterial alteration does not destroy the negotiability of a negotiable instrument. Ibig sabihin ito yung opposite ng material alteration, guys. Example of immaterial alteration in an instrument, number 1, adding of words implied by law which do not prejudice anyone. Number 2, alteration on the serial number of a check. So that's it. Easy peasy. Napakadali lang ng meaning ng material alteration. Immaterial alteration. So thank you guys. Hope you understand our topic for today.